Well, as you can judge via the title of this episode, I will be changing the oil in my Mark 1 Focus. And oh my God, has this not been done like a million times before? Yes, it has. I mean, goodness me, I think you could probably count about 20, 30 different videos of doing this on a Ford Focus Mark 1. Probably not as much as 20, but I reckon about 10 more channels have done this. The ironic thing is, this channel has been running for over 12 months now, and I have not changed the oil in the Mark 1 at all, probably for about 18 months, so some 6 months prior to starting the channel. That is the maximum I would suggest that you basically between intervals of changing oil on a Mark 1 Focus, regardless of mileage. As I've said before, oil is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture over time by just sitting in the sump. It is not ideal long term, and that's why if you don't change the oil, it just gets gunky in this inside the engine. The cans will be nasty. You'll notice the oil on the dipstick will be black and sludgy. It's nasty, and all it takes is a little bit of sludge to gunk up a very thin, very small oil gallery, and that is the end of your engine, regardless of what engine it is. But on a Ford Sigma or a Zetec engine, it is fully recommended to change the engine oil every 12 to 18 months. And yes, I do insist that even with modern oils, I would suggest you do this. Now, my poison of choice is Manol Energy, okay, 5W30. It's pretty much at the cheaper end, and the truth is I change it quite regularly. I've used this oil for quite a few years and I've never had any issues whatsoever. It is to spec. I will read you the spec. Oh, if I can find it on the back side, that is. Nope, I can't find the spec whatsoever. 2 seconds. I have actually got the manual right here where I can actually find the actual spec. Right, the specification is WSSM2C913A. It's 913A. That was the original specification from the factory, okay? Now that was superseded very quickly by 913B. This is 913B, okay? And it's most likely you will not get 913A no more. It was superseded by B many years ago, and this is the one generically a lot of engine oils actually follow. 913C is something that was used in the 2011 Ford Focus Mark IIIs for the Sigma engine, the old 1.6 and Fiesta 1.4s and 125s, because the Sigma went on quite a long time. 913C is the most recent one. There was a 913D, but I believe that was for diesels. So this is 913B is this specification. It follows the specs. Yes, there are more expensive oils on the market, but the truth is, how good are they? Probably nowhere, not as, I wouldn't say any significantly better than this. I think the reason that Castrol and a few others are so expensive is because of the additives they supposedly put in. But there really isn't any proof of that. I always think it's good to change the oil every 12 to 18 months with slightly cheaper oil, but to spec, from the more expensive oil, and leave it for longer. I just don't see any point personally, and that's the way I've worked it. And my car runs like a Swiss watch. It's as simple as that. And the oil filter, considering that I am going to be taking the car and putting it on some shows this year, I would want something more original than the Borg and Beck oil filter, which I find, by the way, Borg and Beck oil filters are absolutely fine. Bosch oil filters, most of them are pretty good. I think I've used a Napa oil filter the once, and they're all fine. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of tests on YouTube, you know, testing different oil filters and their filtration properties and all that, how many microns they can go down to. I know that, but the truth is, just change the filter every 12 to 18 months and you won't be faffing around of which one's best. And believe you me, it's really not a problem. But I have a genuine Ford oil filter, a EFL 600. Okay, this is a genuine filter, and it didn't cost more than probably any other. I think it was about £8 this. And I thought I'd want something a little bit more original, considering that where the oil filter is on a Ford Sigma or Ford Zetec. They're right at the front of the engine, and this big white thing you're going to spot a mile off. It's really accessible, and I'm going to show you that now. I will tell you the advisable thing to do is to take the car on a really decent drive, get the oil nice and warm, at least warm, but preferably hot. So drive it for about 15 to 20 minutes. Just don't rag it, just drive it as you'd normally do, and then we'll cut to when I come back on the driveway. See you then. Prepare to watch me not struggle with these nice new Halfords ramps and the extensions. Well, that was a bit of a faff. That was a second attempt, and this wheel, yeah, I got it a bit skewed, but it's on the ramp. It's 3/4 of it at least. These extensions really come in handy, because I show you a problem with most Mark 1s, and I don't, it's because of the ride height, but you do seem to catch the corner of this rubber stone deflector, as they call it. Goodness me, honest to God, I have done that at some point, but I can't remember when I've done it. The bumper will be done at some point. Anyway, a good polish up will. As I say, the bumper's not in great condition, but again, this one's gone the same way. But the idea is that I was really pleased actually, because I put it in drive and then I felt it stop, and it stopped right against the stopper on this side. So I'm really pleased about that. Right, better drain the oil then. Overalls on, and let's get going. Oh, it's hot in here. Right, and what you need is to definitely take it for a hot drive, because that gets the oil nice and thin, easier to drain, and more of the sludge or build up of dirt in the system will eventually be taken out by the oil itself. So right, first things first. Right, first of all, take the oil cap off. It is made of plastic, so be very careful. Give it a good jig. The oil O-ring will be quite stiff if you haven't moved it in ages. Yes, very nice. We've got a set of cams that hasn't disintegrated, and we have the odd mayonnaise under the cap. Oh, my head gasket's gone. No, it hasn't. This car has been sitting for a good, I'd say, week and a half, and we've had some really cold weather. And when you actually drive it then for the first time, you will get this mayonnaise, which is basically moisture in the oil. As I've said before, low mileage oil is probably more worn than high mileage oil. It will absorb water. This is the consequence of this. Obviously, as the oil gets to temperature, the oil is, I should say, the condensation in the oil goes to the oil cap, but most of it just gets basically burnt off as such, as boiling water, and this is the result of that. But you'd have to take it on some long drives in order to achieve that. But anyway, I'm just going to leave the cap just here, and we have the I've said this before as well, this O-ring can be really stiff, so be very careful, because these handles can go brittle. But pull the dipstick out, and that will let extra air into the sump. So we're looking at gravity getting into the engine, and that will allow the oil to flow much nicer from the sump plug. Right, let's go down underneath and find that sump plug. Now, just ignore my air compressor, that's for later. Right, now this is an opportunity now to inspect everywhere for any potential oil leaks. Now, on a Sigma, the sump plug is located on the backside, just where my finger is, okay? It's a 13mm nut with an O-ring that actually is attached to the sump plug. No copper washers needed. The O-ring does the job. It is preferential every so often to change the oil sump plug, but this has been on the car for about 7 years and it doesn't leak. If it does leak, change it. It can be a source of leaks, particularly if it's not done up enough. There is a torque setting, but honestly, don't use it. Just enough so it's really snug, and that's what you need. Now, at the front of the car, we have the oil filter, which is really, really nicely exposed. I mean, there are a number of tools, I do apologise for the sunlight, there are a number of tools that you could use to take this filter off because it's in such a good position. Other cars have got the filters in such awkward positions that you can only use one of those oil filter removal tools, which I'm going to use today, but I'm just saying you can use a variety of different tools. But it's relatively clean. It can leak via the sump gasket. It's only gasket sealant. It's like instant gasket. There's no gasket from the sump to the block itself. It's just sealant, like a lot of all aluminium engines. They just don't require a sump gasket like back in the olden days. But realistically, this is a chance for you to just look at if there's any weeping from the diff seals. But as I say, on this, there's absolutely nothing whatsoever. Again, on the other side, just have a look for any weakness whatsoever. But it is quite common, if the oil filter is not done up correctly or tight enough, it can leak oil. So if there's a load of oil at the front of your engine, most likely it's the oil filter. Secondly, if you've got oil leaks all around the sump, the oil filter and a few more places, I'd recommend you check your PCV valve and your breathers, because they will be blocked. It will cause excessive pressure in the crankcase, and then the oil that pressure has to go somewhere. Crankcase ventilation is very, very important, and it will cause all sorts of oil leaks. In fact, it gets so bad, oil comes out the dipstick, and then people thinking, oh God, I need a new engine. No, it's just your PVC valve. Trust me, it's up here underneath the inlet in a very slightly inaccessible position, but it can be done with thin hands or maybe some child labour. Get a good bolt at the backside. Now, you're not going to want to put it here underneath, okay, because it's not going to drop straight down. If you've never done an oil change before, you're going to get caught out by this. When you take that plug off, with all the gravity in that engine and that oil that's now very thin, there's a chance that you're going to get covered if you're in the wrong place, or your garage floor is going to get flooded with oil, because it's going to come like that. Okay, it's going to come out like that. It's not going to drop down. So have it positioned. See, if your oil plug is there, you can see where I've kind of positioned it. Okay, so have it right there and ready to catch it. Now, let's see if I can actually crack this off. Make sure it is a 13mm socket, nothing else, please. It will be stiff. That's it. So that wasn't tight at all, actually, strangely enough. Now this is going to come out, and be very careful because it can go up your arm. Trust me, it's just one of those inevitable things. So just going to reposition it. I undo this by hand, actually. It's very coming out really nicely, which is a good sign. Get ready for the mess. Oh, a little bit went down, which is very weird, and some went in. There you go. That's the angle you're looking at. And that oil, well, this one looks really clean. Really, really clean. That is good oil. It is not black. Oh, it's just changed direction for some unknown reason. Now look at that. That froth. You see that froth? That's moisture in the oil. That is moisture in the oil. That is what happens to low mileage oil. Now, the truth is, I would really like to have a chance to actually send some engine oil off for analysis, because that will tell you exactly what you need to know about the state of your engine. There's so many places that will do engine oil analysis, and I'd rather fancy it, but it could reveal some interesting things. I have to say, that protection that I gave it, I'm just looking around while that oil is dripping, and I tell you what, it's come up so nicely. I'm really chuffed. Even the back of the wheels look good. It just goes to show, one little job at a time, and this is the end result. have those hangers replaced. Those hangers can break off very easily with my cheap, suspicious cat, although it did pass the MOT. Now, this will drip for some time, so I suggest go away, have a cup of tea, or you could speed things up a bit. Little trick I've been told: compressed air straight into the sump. Look at that. Oh, I think I've lost pressure. That doesn't help. Right, after a few minutes we've got to pressure, and let's go. Oh, ah, there we go, there we go. There we go. Wow. Just keep doing this, it will get all the dregs out. Every single last drop. The stuff that would stick in your engine, and you're chucking your clean oil straight into that. This is the moment that I remember that I put the sump plug in there. Jesus Christ. It's always the way. I think you can get these oil pans where you've got a little compartment here for your filter and for this. At least you know the threads are not going to seize. Trying a little experiment. That's been dripping for 2 minutes without air pressure. I've just taken the air compressor off just to rest for a second. Well, I'm going to, while I'm actually putting this into recycled containers to go to the recycling centre, we're just going to leave that, for instance, just to see how much it produces that you would normally keep in an engine. Interesting experiment. I have to say, there is nothing like the smell of hot engine oil. Nice. A final note before it goes in that container, and even with a spout it's getting messy, just get your fingers and just rub the oil between the fingers, and as long as it's not gritty, you're good. If it's gritty, that means there's wear particles from your engine. Yeah, be very careful about that. Just be wary. As long as there's no major traces of glitter or anything else, you're good. And this is really nice and smooth. You can see the colour of it as well. Massive indicator of how good your engine is, and now regularly the oil has been cleaned. That's been drained. The oil pump back underneath, and oh my god. Well, it's only up to about 5 or 10 minutes. Right, now we're going to use the oil filter tool with my 1/2-inch ratchet. It goes on like this. Now, it might be a bit of a faff for me to do this. I might have to set the camera holder up. But basically, it twists anti-clockwise, and then you just pull with the ratchet, and it will come straight off, and then tons of mess will go everywhere. Come on! Gotta watch this pipe. This is the power steering pipe, and believe you me, you don't want to break these. These are extremely rare because these were only fitted to the non-air conditioned models. Just come on. Believe you me, it's one whole big pipe assembly. There we go, it's given in. There we go. And that's because you put oil on the O-ring. And here it comes. Here comes the flood, and I'm going to catch all this all down the blasted engine. What a mess. Always have some brake cleaner free, and you might have to just readjust the position of the pan. There we go. Done. Oh god, it's so messy. hate oil changes like this. I prefer the upside down ones. Ugh. There's a lot of oil in that filter already. Yeah, I think as much as 0.4, 0.5 litres can be contained within the filter itself. I mean, the Sigma uses about just over 4 litres, which is actually not a lot of engine oil. I believe the Z-Techs hold a similar amount. So, as I say, they don't use a lot of engine oil, these things, but that's an awful lot of engine oil that's just come out of there. Not usually do I get that much, but then again, I've been feeding it with lots of air, of which I'm going to do so again. Just get the worst stuff. The oil will be very good for these pipes because they do tend to rust out, these pipes. I did give them a bit of a sanding down. They're still starting to pit just a little bit in places, but a good oil coating is actually a good thing for this pipe. So I'll just make sure this is actually coated with oil, because they can rust out. And I've just noticed that that has started going again and dripping quite a bit. Not there, there. Because you've actually taken the filter off, you've let air through the pump, and now it's coming out the backside again. So it's an awful lot of engine oil right at the top. Ugh. Messy. I just hate oil changes, just messy. No matter how prepared or controlled things get, it doesn't get controlled. Anyway, I'm going to get rid of this and put some air in. There's an awful lot coming out the return. Okay, let it drip. Still dripping. Look at the amount in there that you'd have kept in there. Still dripping. That's it. All the excess around here. Put the filter back on. Right, I had to take a little break then, about an hour, because my phone battery had decided to die almost completely, and secondly, the memory on my phone wasn't brilliant for videos, so I had to go and sort that out again. But it doesn't matter, because this has been quite a fascinating experiment. It's been an hour, and the oil filter has been off, so that's all open through the pump and through the sump and everything like that. All the air and gravity can get through that way, pushing all the residual oil out. We've used the air compressor a few times, and we've left it just to drip. How much oil did we get out in 1 hour, and has it stopped dripping? Not quite, but it has slowed down quite a bit. Goodness me. That is the amount of oil that has just been left to drip for 1 hour. That's absolutely incredible. With obviously air is going through there, going through the pump, then it's going through the oil galleries and the baffle, straight through to the sump where it exits via the sump, where the sump plug would normally be, into there. This is absolutely fascinating. I've always wanted to do something like this, but now, you know, now my car is pretty dry, apart from the oil, which will be located in the camshaft buckets, because you've got the buckets, the sort of the large areas where the camshafts sit that hold oil, so the camshafts are never going to run dry. A lot of older cars have that problem where there are no buckets, so the camshafts essentially run dry for the first few seconds of startup. But on a lot of 80s 90s engines, they started incorporating this sort of stuff, and yeah, so the only oil in this engine are in the camshafts. Everything else is dry, which means we might need to be very careful on startup, and there is a procedure for doing so. But first of all, let's get it all back on together. So, oil filter. Dum dum dum. This makes it far easier to get things off. You must do this. Okay, lovely. And then just screw it back on. You feel it screw in like that. There you go, it's caught. Lovely to have a genuine Ford one on, so people can see this at the show, because you can see, yes, it's very basic. I say power steering pump at the front instead of the air compressor, with this big pipe that takes it above the gearbox and goes all the way to the back where the rack is. I've cleaned a couple of these pipes up. This rack is now really nice and clean like the rest of the car. I did a really good job on that ages ago, and it's come up really well. But literally hand tight is all that's required. Okay, done. Right, let me get the sump plug. Oil filters, it doesn't matter whether it's the long version like this or the short version. Ideally you want the long version because it's bigger capacity, but really honestly I wouldn't worry too much about that. So just wipe all this because it is still dripping, which is just incredible. There you go, put that back in. Get my ratchet out, my 13mm ratchet, and set to tighten. Do not over tighten this, just snug, really nice and snug. So that's it, done. Just before we move on, the power steering switch, which is here where my finger is, there is no leaking from the power steering switch. This is a common fault on the power steering pumps, but I thought I'd show you because I've got the visibility. There is no leaks from that power steering switch, so we're all good. A very common fault, and it can lead to well, a breakdown and a ruined pump, because when that starts leaking, it may leak slowly or it might piss straight out, and you're left with no steering and a pump that's run dry and needs replacing. Yeah, bit of a common fault that. Just this is the time to look at it if you've got power steering pump at the front. If you haven't, if you've got air conditioning like most people, you'll have it round the back, but check all the same. Woo! Very nice indeed. Lovely. Directly in the middle. Right, basically what I'm going to do next is I'm going to try and get the car back off these axle stands in neutral, engine off. Now I know the engine is going to be turning over, but it's not going to be turning over fast because obviously the engine's not been started, and there is probably residual oil in the bearings just to give it a few turns before they start running dry. And that's the idea of doing it this way. You've got to get it back off the rams to check the oil level correctly. I mean, some people would say chuck 4 litres in because the capacity is 4.25 litres with the oil filter. Chuck 4 litres in, start it up, roll it back, and then obviously you can do it like that, and then you top up the rest when you're on level ground. But the problem with that is you've then got to wait half an hour for that oil level to settle again. So don't do that, seriously. I would literally just roll it back off the axle stand, so I'm going to do that right now, obviously moving things out the way. Right, lovely, that was great. Gearbox allowed me to roll back enough. Lovely. Okie dokie, right, we can start filling it. It is 4.25 litres, but what I would do is using the scale on this, okay? So we have a scale. I would just literally fill it up till it gets to the 4 litres point where my finger is, this little big dot here, this dash here, okay? Just fill it up to that point, okay? And then you've got a base level. Check the dipstick after a few minutes, let it go down into the sump, check the dipstick, and then keep filling it up gradually, okay? Gradually. You will start to see it appear on the dipstick potentially after 4 litres, and then after that it just add a little bit, then wait a few minutes, check it again. You don't want to overfill it really. That's not what we're aiming for. We're aiming for somewhere between halfway up the dipstick and maximum on the dipstick. And if you don't know what that looks like, I can show you because it's nice and dry. So basically we're looking somewhere between the middle and the mark on the right hand side, okay? Not the left, that's the low mark. We want it between the middle and the right hand side, the top mark, okay? So yeah, this Weber does not know what it's doing from 1 minute to the next. Right, this beautiful fresh oil in. Wow, it will drip quite a bit, and that is 530. Should be nice and golden and a nice consistency. So just keep putting it in nice and smooth. Right, we have now got to 4 litres. We have put 4 litres in that engine, so we just need to wait 1 minute and check the dipstick. Now, what I've done is put 4 litres in, and it is reading quite high on the dipstick. Now, there is a reason for this. Now, if I just pull this out, it should be like, look how clean that oil is. I'll just pop it back in. It's like water. It really is. That's what new oil should be like, especially if the engine has had regular oil changes. Now, what I will say is there's one thing you can do alternatively that I haven't done. Because of the angle of the filter being pointed in a downwards direction, you can pre-fill the oil filter with oil. It's not necessary, because what we're going to do next is pull the fuel pump fuse, disconnect the coil pack so we have no fuel and no spark, and just turn the engine over just some rotations, and that will get the oil circulating through the oil filter and all the engine, okay? And we're just going to run the engine. We've got 4 litres in there, which is more than enough at the moment, but the idea will be that you start the car, run it for a few minutes, check for leaks, check everything sounds good and looks good, and that's all good. Then park it up, leave it, and then check the dipstick the day after, and that's the way to do it. So let's see if we can do it now. Just pull this up, and it is this fuse here. This one is the fuel pump fuse. Pull that and disconnect the coil pack just by pushing the clip in and moving it sideways. Come on. Oh, a bit stiff. There we go. If it's not been taken off in a while, it will be a bit stiff. Okay. Right. Leave that be and put the oil cap back on. Right, now that will be enough to get the oil circulating pretty much into that filter. That filter should be pretty full. There may be some funny sounds when you start the car, because literally we have got so much oil out of this car, and now what we've done, we're trying to replenish it in all the systems and galleries. So naturally, for the first 5 seconds of a startup, it might sound a bit dry, but only for about a second or two. that is not enough to cause damage to the bearings or anything else, because there is still enough residual oil within the main oil gallery. And now that we've pumped some oil around, it'll be even less insignificant. So let's just go ahead and start it up. Obviously, fuel pump fuse back in, coil pack on, and let's go. I don't know if you could hear that on camera, but there was a little screech for about half a second and then stop. That is the fuel filter filling up and then getting to the brim and then applying the full force of oil around the oil galleries. That's it. That's how quick it takes. Now this is where you check for leaks. You check around the fill filter, nothing. Nothing. Good. Job done. That is how a happy Ford Sigma should sound like. There's more noise from the belts than anything. This is such a ridiculously good engine. I cannot overstate it. Well, that is how to do an oil change. Now, I'm going to turn off, and in about a day's time, I will come back to it, check the level, top up to get the level between halfway and max, and that's what you want, and that's where it should stay. I hope that this has been a useful video for everyone who maybe hasn't had the confidence to change the oil on a Zetec. They are so easy. I could have done this in my sleep. And for this time, for the first time, I did a massive experiment to see literally how much oil you can get out. I mean, literally, this is not just with the aid of a compressor. You could have just left it for a few hours. The compressor just speeded things up. But that's the amount of oil that would have been stuck in the engine and mixed with your fresh oil. You don't want that mixing with the fresh oil. You want as much of that out as possible. And I will leave you there. Take care, guys. See you very soon. Do you know what? Sometimes I feel like a life support machine to these two cars, but I absolutely love them both to bits. This one, obviously my first car. 10 years I've owned this beautiful Ford Focus Mark 1, and this Rover 45, she's slowly worming its way into my heart. Not just in terms of how she's been put together, because I've got to know this car quite well in terms of how well it's put together, but in terms of how it drives. I couldn't think of a better two cars to own in terms of being a modern classic and a balance between not being an old classic car, but a usable, reliable, modern classic. And I think this is what my generation go for. But then this is all I've ever known, because on every street you'd have probably seen one of these, and one in every 3 or 4 streets one of these. It's as simple as that. Anyway guys, thanks for your support as always. Take care.